Downtown Los Angeles, a sprawling metropolis of dreams and nightmares, where the glittering promise of Hollywood meets the harsh reality of Skid Row. And in the heart of this urban maze stands a 14-story monument to human tragedy, the Cecil Hotel. For nearly a century, this building has been a magnet for death, despair, and the darkest corners of human nature. It's earned nicknames like America's Hotel Death and the Suicide Hotel, and for good reason. But in February 2013, the Cecil would become the stage for one of the most bizarre and haunting mysteries of the digital age. 21-year-old Canadian student named Elisa Lam checked into the Cecil Hotel on January 26, 2013. 19 days later, her body would be found in the most impossible place imaginable, after security footage of her final moments would capture something so unsettling that it would haunt millions of viewers worldwide. This is the story of how a solo traveler's West Coast adventure became a viral nightmare, and how a century-old hotel's dark history may hold the key to understanding what happened to Elisa Lam. Built in 1924 during the height of the Jazz Age, the Cecil Hotel was designed to be a symbol of elegance and luxury in downtown Los Angeles. With its ornate lobby, high ceilings, and prime location near the business district, it was meant to attract wealthy businessmen and sophisticated travelers. But the Great Depression changed everything. As downtown LA declined, so did the Cecil. By the 1950s, it had become a haven for society's forgotten. The homeless, the mentally ill, the desperately poor, and with that transformation came death. Lots of death. The Cecil Hotel has been the site of at least 16 sudden or unexplained deaths, earning it a reputation that would persist for decades. The first recorded suicide was in 1931, followed by a long series of similar deaths in 1932, 34, 37, 38, 39, and 40. Basically every other year during the hotel's darkest period. But it gets worse, much worse. Serial killer Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker, lived at the Cecil Hotel for a time before his arrest in 1985. While staying there, he was conducting his home invasion crime spree that terrorized Southern California. By 2013, the Cecil had been renamed Stay on Main, in a desperate attempt to distance itself from its bloody past, but changing the name couldn't change the energy of the place, and when Elisa Lam walked through those doors in January 2013, she was entering a building that had been marinated in human misery for nearly a century. Elisa was an experienced traveler despite her young age. She'd backpacked through Europe, she'd navigated foreign cities on her own, and had the street smarts you'd expect from someone who traveled quite a bit. This wasn't some naive tourist stumbling into danger. This was a capable young woman who knew how to take care of herself. But Elisa was also dealing with personal struggles. She'd been open about her battles with depression and bipolar disorder, conditions she managed with medication and therapy. Those who knew her described her as someone who was working hard to live a full life despite her mental health challenges. Her blog posts and social media updates during the trip showed someone who was genuinely excited about her travels. She wrote about visiting the San Diego Zoo, exploring Santa Cruz, and her plans to see Los Angeles before heading to San Francisco. There was nothing in her communications that suggested she was in a crisis or planning to harm herself. On January 26, 2013, Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel. She booked a shared room on the hotel's budget floor, a decision that would put her in one of the most dangerous environments in Los Angeles, but she had no way of knowing that she'd just entered a building where tragedy was woven into the very fabric of its existence. Her parents expected her to check out on January 31st and continue her journey north to San Francisco, but January 31st came and went without word from Elisa. When she failed to check out as planned, hotel staff entered her room and found her belongings still there. Her luggage, her laptop, her personal items. It was as if she'd simply vanished into thin air. Her family immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Elisa. She was responsible. She always kept in touch and had detailed plans for her trip. When they couldn't reach her, they contacted the Los Angeles Police Department and reported her missing. Now, the initial investigation yielded little. Hotel staff reported seeing Elisa in the lobby and common areas, but no one could pinpoint exactly when she'd last been seen. The Cecil Hotel's security cameras had captured footage of her, but it would be nearly 2 weeks before police would realize what they'd found. Meanwhile, Elisa's family flew to Los Angeles to aid in the search. They distributed flyers, contacted local media, and worked with the police to piece together her final days. But the Cecil Hotel wasn't giving up its secrets easily. She was last seen on January 31st, 2013, and as days turned into weeks, the case began to take on an increasingly desperate tone. On February 13th, 2013, the Los Angeles Police Department released security camera footage, and what happens next is deeply unsettling. She appears frantic and paranoid in the 4 minutes of footage, pressing multiple buttons, peeking nervously out of the doors, and hiding against the walls of the unmoving elevator from what appears to be an unseen person. But it's not just what she's doing, it's how she's doing it. Elisa's movements were erratic, almost otherworldly. She gestures wildly with her hands as if she's having a conversation with someone who isn't there. She presses multiple elevator buttons, but the elevator doesn't move. She peers out into the hallway repeatedly, as if she's being stalked by someone we can't see. She appears to be trying to hide from someone inside the elevator, leaning as close as she can against the elevator wall before once again peering out. And at one point, she seems to be counting on her fingers, and hand movements become increasingly animated, almost ritualistic. The most chilling part comes near the end of the footage. From the 2:30 mark of the video, Elisa disappears out of sight, but the footage keeps rolling. The elevator doors, which had been malfunctioning throughout the video, suddenly begin working normally. The elevator starts moving and Elisa is gone. The video raised more questions than it answered. Who or what was she hiding from? Why wasn't the elevator working properly? And most disturbing of all, was she alone in that elevator, or was someone else there that we couldn't see? 6 days after the elevator video was released, on February 19th, 2013, guests at the Cecil Hotel began complaining about problems with the water. The pressure was low, the color was off, and some guests reported a strange taste. Maintenance workers were sent to investigate the hotel's water system. What they found on the roof of the Cecil Hotel would become one of the most shocking discoveries in recent memory. On February 19th, 2013, Lam's body was found inside a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel. This wasn't just any water tank. These were massive, industrial-sized water tanks, the kind you see on top of buildings. They were cylindrical, 4 feet in diameter. The opening at the top was heavy and difficult to access, so hotel employees needed a ladder to reach it. The discovery raised immediate questions on how Elisa had ended up there. The roof of the Cecil Hotel was supposed to be secured. It was only accessible to hotel staff with special keys. The water tanks themselves were not easily accessible, and the heavy lids weren't something that could be moved casually. Even more puzzling was Elisa's condition when she was found. She was found naked, floating in the water tank with her clothes and belongings found at the bottom of the tank. There were no obvious signs of trauma, no indications of how she'd gotten into the tank or why she would have removed her clothing. Hotel guests had been drinking, showering, and brushing their teeth with water from the tank containing Elisa's body for up to 3 weeks. In the 11 years since Elisa Lam's death, numerous theories have emerged to explain what happened. While an autopsy performed on February 21st was inconclusive, the official cause of death was listed as accidental drowning with bipolar disorder as a contributing factor, but many people find this explanation unsatisfactory. The most widely accepted explanation is that Elisa experienced a severe mental health episode. Her erratic behavior in the elevator video, combined with her history of bipolar disorder, suggests she may have been in the midst of a psychotic break or a manic episode. Supporters of this theory point out that mental health crises can cause people to behave in ways that seem impossible to understand. The hand gestures, the apparent paranoia, the strange movements, these could all be symptoms of a severe psychiatric episode. But this theory still doesn't explain how Elisa accessed the roof, how she got into the water tank, or why she would have removed her clothing. The logistics of her death remain puzzling, even if we accept that she was experiencing a mental health crisis. Another explanation could be that there was a medical issue, and it focuses on Elisa's medication. Some researchers have suggested that she may have been experiencing side effects from her psychiatric medications, or that she may have stopped taking them altogether. Certain medications can cause severe side effects when discontinued abruptly, including paranoia, hallucinations, and other erratic behavior. This could explain the elevator video and her apparent distress in her final days. However, toxicology reports didn't reveal any unusual drug levels in her system, and there's no evidence that she'd stopped taking her medicine. This theory, while plausible, lacks super concrete support evidence. Many people refuse to accept that Elisa's death was accidental, pointing to the physical impossibilities of her accessing the water tank alone. Like, she couldn't open it. The roof was supposed to be secured. The tanks were difficult to access, and the heavy lids would have been challenging for a small person to move. Some theories suggest that Elisa was murdered and her body was placed in the water tank to hide evidence. The removal of her clothing and the positioning of her body in the tank would indicate that someone else was involved. However, there was no evidence of trauma on her body. There was no defensive wounds, bruises, or signs of a struggle. If someone did murder Elisa, they left no physical evidence behind. Given the Cecil Hotel's dark history, the next theory will lead people to believe that there were some supernatural forces that were involved in her death. They point to the elevator's malfunction, her apparent interaction with invisible entities, and the general atmosphere of evil that permeates through the building. Paranormal investigators have noted that the Cecil Hotel has been the site of numerous unexplained phenomena over the years. Guests have reported seeing apparitions, hearing disembodied voices, and experiencing an overwhelming sense of dread. While this theory lacks scientific credibility, it speaks to the profound unease that many people feel when watching the elevator video. There's something about Elisa's behavior that seems to transcend normal human experience. Internet sleuths have noted eerie similarities between Elisa's death and a horror video game called Dark Water. The game involves elevators, water tanks, and mysterious deaths, parallels that some find too coincidental to ignore. However, this is highly circumstantial and don't provide any concrete evidence about what actually happened to Elisa. What makes Elisa Lam's case unique isn't just the mystery of her death, it's how the internet transformed her tragedy into a global phenomenon. The elevator video became one of the most watched pieces of security footage in history, spawning countless analysis videos, conspiracy theories, and amateur investigations. Amateur detectives dissected every frame of the video looking for clues that professional investigators might have missed. People noticed the timestamp on the video was quite blurry and suggested it had perhaps been tampered with, eliminating 53 seconds of film. Others suggested it had been slowed down. The case became a perfect storm of internet culture, mysterious footage, and an eerie location, unexplained circumstances, and a young woman whose life was cut tragically short. It combined elements of true crime, supernatural horror, and urban legend into something that captured the imagination worldwide. The case highlights the double-edged nature of internet culture. While online attention can help solve crimes and bring justice, It can also turn real human tragedy into viral content that prioritizes mystery over empathy. So let's be respectful of all this. "11 years after Elisa Lam's death, we're still no closer to understanding what really happened in those final days at the Cecil Hotel. The official explanation of accidental drowning during a mental health episode satisfies some, but leaves many questions unanswered. The Cecil Hotel itself has continued to struggle with its dark reputation. Renovations started in 2017. They were halted by COVID-19, resulting in the hotel's temporary closure. It's unclear if the building will ever fully escape the shadow of its history. Elisa's case has had a lasting impact on how we think about mental health and internet culture, and the responsibility we have when engaging with real-world tragedies. It's a reminder that behind every viral video and internet mystery is a real person with a real family who deserves dignity and respect." But perhaps the most haunting aspect of Elisa's case is how it reflects the Cecil Hotel's century-long history of tragedy. In a building where so many have died, where so much suffering has occurred, Elisa's death feels less like an isolated incident and more like a part of a pattern we don't fully understand. Until then, remember Elisa Lam, not just as a mystery to be solved, but as a young woman whose life was cut tragically short. In a world that often treats real tragedy as entertainment, the least we can do is remember the human being behind the story. Because, in the end, every mystery involves someone's whole world, someone who was loved, someone who was missed, someone who deserved better than what they got. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors.